strategy in the age of intelligent machines. Lots of human interaction going on here, which is fantastic. Let's continue into the break. My name is David Lancey. I'm a senior partner in strategy, and I'm delighted to be here. It's a big topic. It prompts at least 3 questions. Firstly, and I know you covered this yesterday, strategy as a concept, as a process, is it resilient or redundant in the world of machines? Secondly, innovation, where and how do you actually innovate in your business, in your business model and in the industry? And thirdly, in terms of the organisation itself, how do you do it? Do you separate, or do you do it in an integrated fashion? It probably prompts more, but I'm going to focus on 3. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Daniel, Clara and Rob, who are going to give some provocation on the topic from a variety of different perspectives, from academia, from venture capital, from advisory, from corporate. I've encouraged them to be stimulating, challenging, and provocative, and they're going to give short, sharp presentations, and then we can have a great discussion around that. Yeah. Just before we do, I'm just going to frame the discussion a little bit more. Talking about companies, well, actually, let's go up a level. There is an AI race globally. If you look at the potential gains from AI, this is our study. Actually, substantial productivity gains at the global level, a 15 trillion prize through productivity enhancement, and at the top we see China and North America, probably what you expect. But actually, we're seeing governments challenge each other and race each other in terms of what they're doing, in terms of their planning and investments. And China is leading the way in terms of fostering the environment for artificial intelligence. But actually, when you talk about the company level, strategic choices, you have to think of it in three ways. Firstly, assisted AI, that's the simple stuff, or simpler stuff. Robotic process automation, that's where many companies are basing their focus at the moment. Rules-based repeatable tasks, think of your Gmail inbox and how emails go into certain boxes. That's one example of that. The second one is around augmented AI. Think about your Netflix recommendations that don't just come from you, they come from other users in the system and a learning system. This is actually where AI machines develop something new, as opposed to just doing something better. And thirdly, and this is the most radical, and we're seeing this in sort of facial recognition and obviously cars, potentially, in terms of some of the trials, autonomous AI, where actually it creates and deploys machines that act on their own. Those are 3 examples. And I guess the framing of this, and this is in a paper I wrote in Strategy and Business, is that companies have to make some real choices here. This is not academic in terms of their daily lives. They actually need to focus on the left-hand side in terms of which part of the business they want to apply machines. The customer-facing parts, or in the workflow, and similarly, how far do they want to go from being fully automated to actually involving humans. And there's lots of detail here that I'm not going to go through. These are practical examples of what companies are doing in the media and tech industry. It's here right now. People have been doing this for many, many years. But there is concern about how vulnerable companies may be to it, about transparency, how the actual machines work, and a concern around risk. So yes, and Clara will talk about this, boards are thinking about AI, but it's not obvious that they will invest big time because of concern about will it break my organisation? Do I know enough about it to make big decisions? And how much do I hand over? And actually there are a lot of myths. The first myth being the photograph. It's not all about robots, that's not just machines and AI. But there are some myths. It's not new. Actually, John McCarthy developed the term in a Dartmouth project back in 1956, and many of the companies you'll be interacting with have been doing this for 5 to 10 years, even though it's quite buzzy in the media at the moment. And actually, whilst we may debate the benefits of humans versus robots doing certain activities, actually in many cases it's the combination that is better than each of them individually, chess being the example that's often quoted. And very importantly, although in terms of the skills agenda, everybody says it's all about people investing in AI, everybody wants to be involved in AI, actually 67% of data scientists and analytical people are doing things other than AI. So there are other shows in town. And importantly, and we'll talk about this, are boards resilient and relevant in the world of machines? And actually, does AI have a role to play? An example dating back to 2014 in Hong Kong, where actually an organisation, a VC called Deep Knowledge Ventures, had a board member that was a machine. The 6th board member. And very importantly, this gets a bit more personal, actually in terms of whether humans like or dislike or are fearful of machines, actually when surveyed, the majority think that it would be a good idea if it made their work-life balance better, perhaps by taking away some of the repeatable, boring tasks. We've been doing a lot in PwC. I'm not in strategy angle, I'm not here to plug it, but actually more importantly, we've been doing it in our own business. Hey, there you go, a consultant actually applying what they said. There's a rarity. And we actually have a dedicated team. We're actually a business in our own right, funnily enough. 3 billion in the UK, 35 billion globally. We're actually doing that ourselves. It prompts big questions ourselves in terms of how much risk we want to take on and what does it mean for the skills of our of people involved, from the juniors all the way to the top. A topic that Michael Yacobides and others said. And I think he was effectively saying in one of his other talks on this topic that I'm probably going to be dead or irrelevant in a few years' time. And with that in mind, I'm now going to hand over to the panel who are going to tell you more about it. I'm going to kick-start with Daniel.
Great. Thank you. So I have about 15 minutes.
Yep.
And this is going to be very interactive, so hopefully you're nice and warm. Just a little bit about my background. I kind of wear 3 hats. I run a master's program in UCL, business analytics, applying AI to solving problems in industry and in government. My entire academic background is in AI, and I also have a corporate hat where I run a company called Satalia, which has about 80 people distributed across Europe. Actually, the company was born out of LBS 12 years ago. I did some studying here, and I travel the world educating industry and academia and politicians about the impact of AI on society. So I want to cover 2 things actually. I'm going to be very bold and try and define both AI and innovation. And the first thing I want to do is I want to take you through this technology stack. And I say this is going to be very interactive, so please engage. The first question that I want to ask you all is, what is data? What's data? Don't Google it. What's data?
Bits.
Bits, nice, excellent. A lot of people say information. It's not quite information, it's bits. So it's just symbols. It comes from the Latin word datum, which means given things. It's stuff. It's not until you give it context does it become information. So if I say to you 210280, that's data. If I say that it's a date of birth, then it becomes information. Okay, so what does that say? What does that say? John read the letter to Mary. John read the letter to Mary. Okay, so picture in your head, John read the letter to Mary. Picture that scene in your head. What picture do you have? You know, John read the letter to Mary. What's the picture? It's good insight into your brains, huh?
Breakfast table.
Breakfast table.
Yeah.
You're hungry.
Sitting down with a cup of coffee. John Stanhope.
Reading a letter
Yeah.
out loud to Mary.
Yes.
Anybody else have a different picture in their head? John read the letter to Mary.
Reading the letter that he has written to Mary.
Yeah, so he's reading a letter that was sent to Mary or that's addressed to Mary. Anybody else? Different? Yes?
Reading the letter someone else has addressed to me.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But the letter could be a letter of the alphabet, and they could be reading a letter. The letter could be the name of a book, and I said John read the letter to Mary. The name of the book could be The Letter to Mary, and I said John read the letter to Mary. This has over 13 different interpretations, and one of the biggest challenges we have in computer science is taking this stuff and figuring out what it actually means. As it happens, we're getting quite good at that now.
John could be a artificially intelligent toilet.
14 different interpretations. All right, so I usually take people through this kind of technology stack, and imagine if I give you a spreadsheet, and in that spreadsheet it has 3 columns. It has the temperature, it has the date, and it has the number of ice creams that I sold on that date. What do you do with that information? Date, temperature, number of ice cream sales.
Run a regression.
Yeah, excellent. You try to find a pattern. So let's graph it. So let's draw a graph. So if I've got temperature along the bottom here, and I've got number of ice cream cells here, what would my graph look like? Good, it's not a trick question, good. So you'll see some sort of trend going upwards. This is called descriptive analytics. We can do something very cool now. We can do a thing called predictive analytics. We can do linear regression, which means put a line through it. We can all do this in 2 clicks. And now what we have is we have predictive power. Right? We can say, tomorrow is 22 degrees outside, and we look along our graph and we can see how many ice creams we need to manufacture. And I would argue that knowledge is organising information to help us find patterns. But knowing something doesn't necessarily mean that you understand it. So why do we sell more ice creams when it's hot outside? Can anybody tell me? Why do we sell more ice creams when it's hotter?
People want to cool down.
Okay, well, I'm inside, it's hot outside, what's the first thing that happens?
People go outside.
I go outside, and why do I go outside?
Because it's nice.
It's nice. So people like the sun, then what happens? I get too hot, and then what happens?
Ice cream.
What do I do with the ice cream? Put it down my pants, what do I do? Huh? I eat it, and why does eating ice cream cool me down? Thermodynamics. Okay, so to expect a computer to understand that narrative is actually a big ask. So it's really important to bridge the people that are really good at finding patterns from data to the people that know what those patterns mean. Because if I built a factory based on this model that I've created, this model, I've put it into a factory, somebody's going to say, Daniel, there's something wrong here. Because if tomorrow is the hottest day ever, ever, what's my factory going to do? It's going to produce loads and loads of ice creams. That's what my model says. But what will really happen is if it's the hottest day ever? Yeah, because it gets you can't reach an ice cream fast enough to cool you down. Right? So our model looks like this. Yeah? And so it's really important to get the people that know about the domain, working with the people that can find the patterns. Because ultimately we want to then make good decisions. And so if I just go back, I would argue that knowledge is organising information to help us find patterns, understanding is interpreting those patterns, and then finally wisdom is utilising that interpretation to be able to drive value. Okay, turns out that decision making is very, very hard. And I'm sure that you've all read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, so I'm going to ask you a series of maths questions now. They're going to start out really easy and they're going to get more and more complicated. And your job is to answer these maths questions as fast as possible, because if you don't, then your competitors will answer them faster than you and they'll take your market. You probably all know the answer to this, but the first one's dead easy. The combined price of a bat and a ball is... Yeah, very good. I forget sometimes what audiences I'm talking to. I've got some other examples that I'm sure you'll get wrong, and we can all agree that humans have biases and that there are many, many examples that we can do here that we'll get these. Okay, let me ask you this question, smart ass. We've got five Pokemon here. Imagine they're staff members, and we have to figure out how to allocate these staff members in a way that satisfy these rules. Now, I'm not going to ask you to do this, but flying Pokemon have got to be the right of walking Pokemon, and no same colours are allowed to touch each other, and males have got to be near females. And let's assume that we know everything about these five Pokemon. How many possible different orientations are there? How many combinations are there of these five Pokemon? Very good. Yeah, so you got 5 times 4 times 3 times, so it's 120 possible orientations. So one orientation, I swap them around. Some of them will satisfy these rules, many of them won't satisfy the rules, but one will be the best one. Make it a little bit more complicated. 15 Pokemon, how many possible orientations are there? Oh, cheat. How many off the top of your head? Yes? Big number? Yeah. It's over a trillion possible orientations, right? And these are essentially what are called NP hard or NP complete problems. I won't bore you with the details, but these problems, these resource allocation problems, exist throughout industry. Now, most industries don't have problems of this size; they have problems of this size. So it's here 500 Pokemon. How many possible orientations are there? Big number. Yeah, so it's more than trillions. So it's a number that's got over 1,000 digits, and just to put this into context, that's how many atoms there are in the universe. And again, to give this even more context, my company works with PwC. Actually, they have 200,000 Pokemon, 200,000 staff members they need to allocate to projects over the coming year. They've got 400 people sitting in the room trying to figure out how to solve these problems. It's not necessarily the best use of those people's time. So you can build algorithms to solve these problems much better than humans. Okay, imagine I've got my ice cream factory, and here's some number of points that my ice cream van has to deliver in London. We could probably sit here and come up with quite a nice route around these points, the one that has the shortest path, or the least amount of petrol. But if we were starting here, where would you go first if you were to draw a route around these 24 points? Where would you go first? Maybe here, maybe here. We could draw quite a nice route around these points after a few minutes. How long will it take a computer to come up with the best solution?
Non-polynomial time.
Huh?
Non-polynomial time.
Yeah, so you've got some very smart people in the room. So some people say milliseconds, but actually it will take 20 billion years to come up with the shortest path. Not really, but if you put 24 times 23 times 20 into your calculator, you get this number. That's how many possible orientations, or how many possible routes there are. If you had a computer that could look at 1 million routes a second, it would take longer than the age of the universe to go through all possible ones. And if I had another point to this map, say it's 25 times 20 billion years, if I had another point to the map, 26 times 25 times 20 billion years, these problems get very big, very hard, very quickly. And again, to put this into context, one of my clients is Tesco. They're delivering to 100,000 points on the map. And of course, we don't have trillions and trillions of years to figure out these the shortest path. We have to use algorithms to solve these problems. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because at the moment, everybody's excited about deep learning, machine learning, and neural networks. And I would argue that neural networks, deep learning, are very good at finding patterns from data. Right? They're very, like humans are, we're really good at looking around this messy world of stuff and figuring out that you're male and female and that's a chair. We're not very good at making decisions. We're not good at solving these types of problems. So when I build systems for companies, I have to make sure that the data's there. We use machine learning, neural networks, all that kind of stuff to find the patterns from the data. But crucially, then you need to be able to utilize optimization, operations research, discrete mathematics to make decisions. And that element there typically gets missed by industry. Right? Everybody's like, let's just throw as much machine learning, deep learning at our problems. These models will suffer the same biases or similar biases that biological systems do. So please don't get seduced into thinking that machine learning is going to solve your problem. It probably will solve the problem if you can get machine learning to build algorithms to solve that problem, but we're still a way off that. Okay, so this is automation. You give it data, it goes through some sort of model, it makes a decision. You give it the same data, it makes the same decision. What's the definition of stupidity? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different answer. So most systems in production that I've seen look like this. It's not until you upgrade them, it's not until you give some data to a data scientist that improves the model and then puts the model back into production after 6 months do these systems adapt. Okay, this is currently what happens in industry. And actually I would argue that one of the best definitions of intelligence I've ever found is actually this one. My master's was on intelligence. It's goal-directed adaptive behavior. It's really quite a nice definition. Goal-directed in the sense we're trying to achieve an objective, sell as many ice creams or utilize our employees or minimize our drive time, whatever. Behavior is how quickly can we move towards that goal? How quickly can we orientate our resources to move towards that goal? But the key word in this definition for me is adaptive. If your system is not adapting itself in production, I would argue that it's not AI. And I actually haven't seen any successful systems in production that adapt themselves. If you say to an IT person, I'm going to give you a technology, you're going to give it some data, it'll make a decision, and tomorrow you give it the same data, it'll make a different decision, they're like, no, you're not going to put that into my production. We need to really understand how these systems operate, we need to make sure that they're controlled and they don't misbehave. So building AI systems is very, very hard. Having this adaptive component, you need to put controls in place and all this kind of stuff. So I just wanted to drum that home. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. People often think that AI, the definition of AI is doing things that humans can do and better, but actually I would argue that humans are pretty rubbish at most things. Go and boil some water by yourself. A kettle can do that better than you. Sorry?
Oh, is this reinforcement learning you're saying here?
So it's reinforcement learning if it's adapting its own model. So if, for example, I have my ice cream model here, and then tomorrow is the hottest day ever, and I have no ice cream cells, if the model adapts itself, changes itself, then I would argue that it's AI. But at the moment, it won't adapt itself until you give the data to a data scientist, they update the model, and put it back into production. Yeah, that's the difference. Okay, and as you all know, that if this is the bounds of human ability, we can build, I would argue that we can build probably almost any system now that can outperform humans at anything. But it's very, very inefficient to build individual systems. You don't want to build 40 different systems to do 40 different things. It's quite inefficient. So there's this drive in academia, I'm sure you all know this, to try and build artificial general intelligence. Can you build one system that can do 40 things rather than 40 different systems? And we're still a long way off in industry building these types of systems. And of course, if we extrapolate this out to its extreme, then over the coming decades, we will build a brain smarter than us in every single possible way. And we all know that this is often referred to as the technological singularity. It could be the most glorious thing that happens to humanity. It could be also our biggest existential threat, and it keeps me awake at night. So this is a particularly exciting and interesting thing for me, but most scholars predict that it's going to happen around the middle of our century. I'd be quite interested to hear what you think about this. Before we build the superintelligence, we're having to build ethical systems. We're having to build AI into systems. For thousands of years, philosophers have been pontificating about problems like this. This is a trolley problem. You're in your driverless car. In front of you, there's a kid. To the right, there are two adults. To the left, there's a cliff. The car can't stop. Who's it kill? Who's it kill? Huh? The kid? Huh? It's difficult, isn't it? It's really difficult. I heard recently that we might have an ethical setting in our car that will say what our preference is, so we should say cats over kids. I actually also heard recently that they're going to do a brain scan of your personality when you buy the car, and they're going to put your personality in the car, so it'll behave like you would do in that situation. Yeah, so don't be in a bad mood that day. Let me ask you one more question actually. There's a burning building, and in the burning building there's a crying baby. And a suitcase with £100 million. What do you save if you're going to save one? 100 million pounds. Okay, this is a really clever guy. How many kids can you save in 100 million pounds? Exactly. It's a really hard question to answer. All right, innovation. So we're going to talk about AI a little bit later on. Innovation. Okay. So I just want you to take a moment and look at this this screen. So just read this. Please read it. It's important. So this is a hierarchy. This is how organisations are traditionally structured. And I think that this is broken. I think that this is not the best way to create innovative companies. Okay, so let's. The best definition I've found on innovation is actually by Steve Jobs. He said innovation is creativity that ships. What's the most important word in that definition? So who thinks creativity ships? I think it's the word that. All of my questions are questions. So that is the process of taking ideas and getting them to the point where somebody's willing to buy them. And that's a very painful, long process. In some respects, the entrepreneur embodies that process. It's hard, figuring out will somebody buy this idea. And I would argue over the coming decade, this technology stack that I described will be commoditized. We already have access to tons of open source tools that help us find patterns in data, and I expect at some point we will have technologies that can adapt themselves. There's a concept called AutoML that Google are working on and things like that. So for me, the next biggest battleground, well, it's always been the biggest battleground, is how do you attract and empower your talent to use these technologies to come up with new innovations, and how do you get those innovations to market as fast as possible? And I'm sure you all know this, that one of the nice introductory books on motivation is by Dan Pink, Drive. He said there are three things that motivate people: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is giving people the freedom to do whatever they want. Mastery is giving them the ability to become really good at what they want. And purpose is giving them something higher to align themselves with. And Dan would argue actually there's two types of purpose. There's a small p purpose, which is making sure that every day you're having some sort of contribution, and then there's a big P purpose, which is doing something good for humanity. I actually think there's a fourth one, which is around autonomy, around attachment theory and safety, but we can talk about that later. So the first thing to do is how do you attract talent? And I work with a lot of organisations that are wanting to build out their own AI team. The first dimension you need to look at is how sexy is your industry or your brand, and the next dimension is how interesting or challenging are your problems. If you're not sexy and you don't have hard problems, you're not going to attract talent. You need to, and if you're sexy and you've got lots of problems, you'll attract talent and they will stick. And if you're in the other two quadrants, then you'll attract talent but they'll churn. And that can be more dangerous to an organisation than not being able to attract talent at all. And as a company, you need to be really honest with yourself about where you sit on that matrix, because that will dictate whether you're going to be working with third-party vendors or whatever. Once you've attracted talent, then you need to figure out how to mobilise them. And how do you create a culture and a set of processes to make sure that those talent are motivated to drive these innovations to market. And I think that what we've seen over the past few decades is the flattening of organisations, the removing of middle managers, partly because technology allows us to communicate between these layers faster, but I still think that this is broken. I'm trying to create, I've got about 80 people in my company, I'm trying to create a completely decentralised company, where everybody's completely free to do it. We don't have any managers, we don't have any hierarchies, we don't have any KPIs, we've got unlimited holiday, you can do whatever you want. We literally have no rules. I have,
Hippie.
sorry?
You're a hippie.
A hippie, I think probably am, or an anarchist, I don't quite know which. But we, maybe just give you an idea, 9 months ago we had everybody make public recommendations for their own salary. You would declare publicly what you think you should be paid, and then other people would then vote on whether that salary should be reduced or increased or kept the same. And if I was voting on your salary, the weight of my vote would be a function of two things. One is how closely have I worked with you over the past year? And we can look at our data, we can look at our digital footprint, we can see how people are connected. Might have an image actually. Yep. So also how highly I am regarded as a strategic decision maker. So if I was voting, I had interns that were voting on my salary, and I had interns that were voting on other people's salaries whose vote was more weighted than mine because they were closer to those people. Does that make sense? And so we're trying to use data in our organisation to free people up. To remove this idea of having managers, communication conduits.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, always.
What does that do to the gender gap?
Really, really great question, actually. I couldn't have said that better myself. You can't really see this very well, but these are different swarm diagrams for activities in the company. So I don't know if this has got a laser. So this is I don't know, email activity. That's me there. That's my COO, and that's all the people in the company. This is Google Drive activity. This is strategic decision making. So that's me. my COO and other people in the organisation. What was really interesting is we had a number of females that were undervaluing themselves. They were either undervaluing themselves or they were being very conscientious about their own salary and still trying to work it out. So this is one example. So one of our data scientists, female data scientists, you can see here, she's the blue dot. She got quite a lot of votes to approve. In this case, 36 votes to reduce. That's worth probably just one person. And then loads and loads and loads of votes to increase. You need to increase your salary. She would go away. She would then make a new recommendation for her salary, and you can see now a lot more votes to approve. That person's changed their mind. They realise they made a bad decision, and now still people in the company saying, look, you need to increase your salary. So what it did is it highlighted that gender bias, and it fixed it. As it happens, that one for me, everybody in my company said, Daniel, you need to increase your salary. Just to summarise, we've touched upon the technological singularity, and I'm sure that many of you have read about this and when the predictions are. We've also got the concept called the economic singularity, and both of these books are very good books if you want to read about this topic. This study was done, I'm sure you've seen this, by MIT a few years ago, saying when we expect automation or AI to remove these different jobs. We can see here that Go is expected to happen in 13 years, but that's already done. So this is, I think, a very overestimate of when I think AI is going to replace jobs. And so, just before I close, one of the things I'm interested in is we're building a platform in my company to create a completely decentralized company where anybody from anywhere in the world can contribute to whatever projects they want. They're completely free and be remunerated for that. And my long-term goal is to actually remove the concept of a company. I want to create a completely decentralized world that doesn't have such thing as a company. You can, yes?
On that 2x2 of talent,
Yeah.
would you put your company in the upper right-hand quadrant?
My goal is to try and bring interesting projects into the company so that it allows them to do interesting things. But in the background, so when it comes to, so I think that we've got talented people. I think we've got talented people, but my job is to give them stuff that makes it, that they find really interesting. And so we have two purposes. One is delivering daily on the hard problems that we're solving for companies, and then in the background, secretly, what I'm trying to do is amass an army of really smart people to figure out how to solve problems in the economic singularity. So in the next 20, 30 years, where people are freed up from their jobs, what will that world look like? Will it be problematic? And how could we as an organisation contribute to solving problems in that world? So our purpose is to enable everybody to do what they want. So where you might not have a job, how can you find your passion and pursue it?
Do you measure employee engagement?
Not at the moment. We've got other things that we need to be measuring. I'm going to be wrapped up now. Yeah. We've got other things that we need to be measuring right now, but one of the challenges is actually, if you give people unlimited holiday, people will end up taking less holiday. And what I've done is I've given people complete freedom to do whatever they want. If they want to create a Satalia pizza shop tomorrow, they can. But they might not have a job in 6 months' time because we're not good at making pizza. But by giving people that freedom, they take on too much. So my problem right now is we've got people that are working too hard.
How does that model persist at a time when people are, I was going to say job hopping, but that's not quite what I mean.
Yeah.
Millennials in particular, they don't see a career as a career, they see it as a succession of jobs.
Yeah.
Specifically in what you're trying to build, how do you deal with that?
So they can allocate themselves however they want to whatever project. So you're not just a data scientist, you're not just a software engineer, you could go and contribute to strategy if you want. You're free to do whatever you want. And so within this organisation, and I'm also creating spin-out companies as well that they can contribute to, so that they can apply themselves to lots of different things. But they're not just one role. They're a portfolio of roles that are organically changing over time, and I empower them to be able to do that. That's it. Yeah.
Well done. Yes, indeed, he could have, and he would be brilliant. So, from ice creams to financial services.
Thank you. Wow, what a great presentation. Thank you, Ben. So, what I'm going to be talking to you about in the next 10-15 minutes at a significantly much slower pace. I'm going to be talking about how corporate boards should think about artificial intelligence. My experience is primarily gained in financial services. I worked in financial services until 2014. When I retired from financial services, and I say that with a lot of pride, I was serving on a board of directors, and I was pretty senior in the work I was doing. I'm a fund manager by training. I've always liked numbers. So today I'm going to be talking to you about three main things. Why adopt artificial intelligence? Where is it suitable in financial services models? And which are the barriers to adopt this technology? So this is my background. Currently I work at board of directors, primarily in formulating business strategy. I work with investment committees of private equity firms or VCs. I work with executive teams on selection and adoption of AI systems. I also, funnily enough, I work with Ministry of Finances across the globe. And of course, with AI startups, I mentor quite a lot of them. As I mentioned earlier, my background is asset and wealth management, leadership roles. After I left financial services, I was committed to do a PhD, so I spent a few months thinking about what I want to research. My research I identified as being at the intersection of neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and wealth management. That's not necessarily all behavioral science, is really how autonomous systems can deliver improved services in financial services. I'm still a member of Chartered Institute of Securities and Investment in the UK, FinTech, Top 100, Oxford author, da-di-da, and a nerd. So I spend a lot of time talking with technologists. Only last week, there's a photo, a collage of photos I took at Money 2020. I spent time talking with Steve Bosniak about his ideas about how technology will impact financial services. Really mind-boggling. I spent time at this event talking not only with professionals in financial services, with fintechs, incumbents, technologists, but also try to put together academia thinking inside what is actually real, what's happening in financial services. And I still keep my pulse on how board of directors think about transformation and why they should adopt artificial intelligence. I brought for you today 5 main themes which keep coming in my conversations with my clients. And also, I hear these themes in a shape or another at different conferences which I attend. I usually address in the thousands of people across the globe. For the rest of the year, I'll be speaking in Malaysia, in Hong Kong, in Australia, back to New York, and in some places in Europe. So my reach and exposure to how financial services people think about transformation and adoption of AI, it's quite nuanced, I would say. So here are 5 themes. 1, how to reimagine business in a data-driven economy. This is a big theme. The second one is how to create trust with technology. The third one, which are the new revenue and operating models which are being fundamentally transformed? Which are, theme 4, which are the new thinking frameworks we need to apply? And finally, it's a lot of discussion around digital identity and the role of banks. And are banks supposed to monetize and be the safekeeper of our digital identities? Is that a new revenue model? But the 5 main drivers which drive these 5 main themes I have identified as being the customer, trust, personalization, data economy, and volume and velocity of data. So, in financial services, primarily in retail market, the day most of our clients have started doing this, that was the day when our business model, I would argue, has changed. The mere interaction and engagement and the digital footprint our customers leave, just using the phone, it's phenomenal, and it's very insightful as well. It's an opportunity, I would argue, for the first time in our industry, in financial services, to truly deliver personalized service at scale. And I'm going to come back on that concept in a minute. Our customers carry their gadgets everywhere. They drink coffee, they eat, it happens to you every day. We almost don't even think about this type of engagements. I brought for you few stats and a few examples from real life. So you can try to see and put in context the meaning and the value of customer engagement and how do we need to use or consider adoption of AI in order to service our clients better. 62% of US adults own at least one connected device. 73% are likely to switch brands if the experience is poor. 75% of people say trust is very important or extremely important in where they choose to shop. Trust, personalization, reliability, dependability on services. These are main core themes, which in my experience and my opinion is that there is only one institution out there in financial services on the globe who have managed to consistently deliver something which I believe is completely unprecedented in the history of financial services. This is Ant Financial. So these numbers were presented last year, in 2017, by one of their executives at a conference called Money 2020 Europe. I was there, I took a photo, and these are the numbers. Staggering. Just the first number, 450 million clients in payments. Just think about the US population, which Wikipedia, who's the gentleman who did the research on Wikipedia indicates that is the population of America. So their submission is that the growth they have achieved is primarily through understanding, deep user understanding, and not cross-selling products. Our industry, in financial services, we usually made money by cross-selling. You buy insurance, I'm going to sell you mortgage. You buy a car, I'm going to sell you something else. But here, we have a different business model. And Financial has built their growth on using and putting artificial intelligence through what Daniel was explaining earlier, to finding patterns and actually allowing machines to develop an autonomous delivery of these services. This is how they manage, and Financial managed to achieve this kind of success. Pretty staggering. Last week they raised Series C, $14 billion. And their view is that they want to aggressively tackle financial services in Western world. 600 million out of the 14 billion came from Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, which is quite another interesting number to consider. So my prediction is that every single service, payments, insurance, wealth management, and credit scoring, it's at risk, business risk in Western world, once these people come and start developing their partnerships and deliver their services, because they can grow their businesses at scale. Here's another example. This is a platform, Marcus, built by Goldman Sachs. This is an autonomous delivery credit, personal credit platform. Is autonomous. 8 months. In 8 months, Marcus managed to achieve to reach 1 billion in personal loans. In contrast with the other providers in similar offering, 98 months. As you can see, when you have AI at the core of your delivery, you can reach business growth at unprecedented scale. Last week, the conference I attended, Amazon Pay just made their official announcement that they are partnering with Virgin Trains, so you can buy your train tickets. Virgin Trains, to those who are not part of the UK or used to the UK, it's one of the train providers. So as of this week, I think today, you can talk to Alexa and buy your tickets on Virgin Trains. Amazon thinks that voice is the new frontier. But other people in financial services think that artificial intelligence is actually a way to not sell themselves. This is a photograph I took back in February. This company, they spent a nominal egg to put this advert out in a train station in the UK. Intelligent experts, not artificial intelligence. That was a good enough reason for me to write to the chairman of the board. Because there's no way the industry is going that we will be delivering intelligent expertise to our customers without the help of the tools artificial intelligence provides us with. So where is AI suitable in financial services? I would argue that it is the perfect marriage for high-frequency decision-making, like fraud, credit rating, pricing, cross-selling, and next best decision, in personalization of services, and also in cases where you have volume and velocity. Let's just go through some of the breakthroughs with AI and identify the human parity which they have achieved just in the last two years. In 2016, object recognition. So machines can deliver with the same ability and accuracy as a human. 2017, speech recognition. And in 2018, reading comprehension, machine translation, and speech processing. Just think how much power you've got at your fingertips to reinvent your business models. Now, barriers to adoption, in my experience, and with this I'm about to wrap up my presentation, I would argue it's education. My clients and the people I interact in financial services, they really are not informed about what this technology is and what it can do for them. So you cannot make decisions if you don't know the tools you've got at your disposal. So I am a strong proponent of in-depth education of boards and leadership on what AI is and what it can deliver. These people need to know because they are the guardians of shareholders' interests and also the guardians of the people who work for them. There is a lack of understanding of how and one needs to go about a strategic adoption of AI techniques, the impact on business models, and also the impact of disseminating and distributing this kind of change and innovation within the organization. I don't have time today to talk about my theory around distributed networks within the organization for adoption of change of any kind. But I will conclude my presentation with two more stats. One is 94% of banks' leadership have never had any professional experience which relates to technology. This is data extracted from their annual reports in 2017. There is another piece of information I'd like to share with you. It's been produced by IDC, the market intelligence company. 93% of all the CEOs interviewed last year are disappointed in the innovation projects they invested money in. So it's pretty staggering. There's a huge knowledge gap, a huge education gap, and I would argue this is a fantastic opportunity for executive education programs in business schools to address this massive knowledge gap. 10 days ago, Oxford University invited me to address their executive education students and students from their FinTech and Blockchain course at their FinTech and Blockchain Summit. In December, I've been invited by Cass Business School to talk about AI and strategy in business, use cases. What do we need to know? What do executives, the leadership, need to understand? The gap, their knowledge gap is phenomenal. So what do boards need? I would say they need new thinking frameworks to run technology companies. Boards in financial services historically are used to run banks, service companies. But we are in an industry, we are in an era which is data-driven economy, where executives need to learn how to run a technology company, which happens to operate in financial services. This is a huge paradigm shift. None of the leadership I've came across, they're really onto it. With a few exceptions, last week I had the privilege to have a private discussion with the CEO of BBVA Bank. They're one of the leaders in digital transformation and adoption of AI. 3 months ago, I met and had a private discussion with the CEO of DBS in Singapore. Again, another bank, another financial institution sitting at the forefront of change. But what do boards lack? They lack time to think. because they need time to think, to reimagine their business. And I say this with a lot of sympathy, because before 2014, I also lacked the time to think. I did not have the time to think about what the future holds, what the business model I need to think about 10, 15 years down the line. As an executive, I remember I was just between commuting, family, keeping the lights on basically, responding to hundreds of emails and dealing with all sorts of day-to-day jobs. You literally don't have the time to think. And that's where we need you. The entire industry needs you. And I'm saying this with a lot of conviction, because only now, having spent time to think, as a former practitioner, I can see the value of thinking. Because without that thinking, I wouldn't be able to envisage what the world is preparing for this industry. And this industry is moving into a place where leadership needs to be equipped not only with the knowledge frameworks, but also they need to have an absolute crisp, clear ability to execute the strategies. It's nice and fine to just have strategy papers and all of that. Yeah, fine. Framework to think, yeah, good. But someone needs to execute that. And that's where I would argue that whoever executes the leadership needs to learn and needs to be completely aware of that this execution is like a military plan. And here, I'm going to jump on, where's the lady who presented the paper yesterday? Yes, I am born in a military family. 2 parents. I've got this like special training from day one of my life. And it's very important because military training, it trains your mind to do 3 main things, in my opinion, which are absolutely essential for board directors and leadership in financial services to execute the strategy. 1 is precision in execution. The second one is agility in operations. And the third one is structure and vision and thinking. Without these 3, my submission is that no one is going to achieve anything. And Financial will be our next supplier of financial services in the next 20 years. So on that positive note, thank you very much.
Nobody's ever described me as military in any shape or form, but I will try to be precise to give Rob the floor. Moving from financial services back to academia, but also with a VC background, I think you should say. And very importantly, the title of this session comes from Rob's working paper.
So I'm delighted to not speak with you at length about the joint work that I'm working on with Anita and Brian on this issue, primarily because I stand between us and a really interesting dialogue. So what I'm going to do, and I may even elect to move more swiftly than usual through the slides that I currently have, because we're covering a lot of that ground. I'm sorry to get in your way. I'm going to stick very closely to my script, which gets me timed at 7 and like maybe 10 minutes. We're going to try for 7 minutes. No, sincerely, right? And see how we go. So wave me off at 7. At 10, bad things start happening. So this is a jacquard loom. For those of you who can't see the image, it is a bunch of punch cards. It is a programmable loom. It's from the 1800s. Back in the day, it was pretty nifty, and if I had time, I'd talk a lot more about it. I'd also talk a lot more about the technology that I used when I started using computers, programming on a descendant of this jacquard loom technology, and how this jacquard loom technology increased in terms of computational power, storage, and speed to generate the first draft of the internet, which I had the privilege of participating in creating applications that got built on top of that. That turned out to be very formative after my extended break from technology, where I went on sort of a vision quest with the surfboard for a while. And in Act 2 of my career, made common cause with a lot of the people in this room to start thinking about managerial questions and stuff that we deal with in the wild. Okay. And recently, as increases in machine learning and AI has heated up again, we're moving away from the thought of the AI winter. There's been growing interest in the management sciences about the impact of machine learning automated innovation, and the economics of artificial intelligence. And very recently, strategy scholars themselves are starting to weigh in. There have been some essays in the Harvard Business Review, there's a special issue in strategy science, and there's a book most recently called Prediction Machines, I think is the final galley title. Delightful book. Recommend all this stuff. Chat with me afterwards if you want to know about it. Right, on this topic, taking up the question of whether or not the formulation of a firm's strategy, the one thing that gets you like far, the thing that everyone wants you to raise your salary over, whether that very thing, which has been typically the purview of top management, is something that can be replaced by machine. Have we really come this far? No. If you're a strategy scholar, obviously the answer is no, because you can't go into a board of directors and consult with them about their AI strategy if you really mean we're going to replace you with AI. That's not what they're asking you to do when they're asking you to consult for their AI strategy. They're asking you to educate them or whatever. It's just inconceivable to imagine that machines are going to be able to do this kind of thinking. So there's this objection in our literature, in our conversations in strategy, come down to two basic flavors. The first is that for some reason, machines are necessarily incapable of producing the kind of mental work or creative outputs that we take as definitive of strategy formulation. So there's some sort of aspect of human thinking, judgment, creativity, right? And this special parameter is what allows us to be sure that machines can't do this thing. So human creativity and judgment in this context are non-substitutable. There's another flavor of this. This is as you mentioned, the common flavor, which is a bit measured, which is okay. Machines, they might be able to do some kinds of strategy, maybe, but certainly not breakthrough strategy. I don't quite know what that is, but it's special because it generates breakout performance, right? But what's important here is that there are differences. The differences are interesting, and I could talk about them at length. But where they converge is in the conclusion that real strategy, the kind that generates breakout performance, requires a sort of mental thinking, a little mental apparatus the machines are necessarily incapable of doing ever. This is the strategy as special snowflake hypothesis. Right? This hypothesis is not uncommon. Right? It happens all the time. We always tend to think that the higher order task is the thing that we do, and it's special. There are lower order tasks. We know what those tasks are, the things that we don't do. And the lower order tasks, of course, are going to be done by machines, but it's inconceivable to imagine that these higher order tasks could be done because feelings. And this has not gone well. Right? People draw a line in the sand and they say, sure, machines can do this, but they can't do that, and then machines do that. Right? These are really interesting times. And the challenge in strategy for us is that conversations tend to devolve into areas that are typically outside of our pay grade, right? Into questions of impossibility or inevitability, right? And these are essentially fields against fields at high levels of value. I have some feelings, you have some feelings. We don't really understand this very well, but we have enough feelings to generate and enough priors to hope that we can talk about this stuff. Some of these questions that are sort of outside of our purview, which we may get to here, are, do we need fundamental breakthroughs in the algorithms that we have to generate sort of human strategies? Or are the algorithms enough? Or privately, because we spend our time embedded in these companies, do these algorithms, these breakthrough algorithms actually exist and no one is talking about them? That's an open question. Is the computational model of mind an appropriate format from which to begin to think about what human cognition and machine cognition can do or not do? This is incredibly contested territory in the cognitive sciences. This is not easy to come to. And the third is, perhaps there are different kinds of intelligences, and these can, or necessarily cannot, get to the end we see, strategy formulation, through different means than humans might. So, as I mentioned, what you end up with here, if you stick to this sort of trend in the conversation, is a bunch of competing fields about the future. And while that's super cool cocktail party conversation, that doesn't get me where I want to go to, which is a research program, somehow. What I'm interested in is getting to something that I can test. So in the paper that we're working on, we do two things. The first is attempt to upgrade the conversation beyond impossibility and inevitability, and importantly, for strategy scholars, maybe not for you so much, I'm not so interested in AI and ML, to be frank. Right? Strategy is my jam. Technology is not my jam. What I'm really interested in is using this as a wedge to probe strategy's foundations and to ask, again, what is strategy and what's a strategic question? How am I doing on time? 5 minutes?
It's okay, you can.
Yeah.
It's a good flat, you can.
You sure? All right. So I'll give you the map of the territory of the paper, some provocative conclusions, and then I'm going to get out of the way so we can brawl. So what we do in the paper is we take a very conservative construal of today's technology, no magical thinking required. So we look at what we know about today and what's in the wild today, and we make no assumptions about some sort of future breakthrough in algorithms, some sort of massive quantum compute piece. We then decompose the nature of strategic work and machine intelligence, and we sort of map these things on to one another. And this is, you can't see this. This is, I totally recommend watching Frank Chen's video at YouTube, Andreessen Horowitz, AI, What's Working, What's Not, because I've ripped off this graphic from him. Essentially what we're saying is, can we get to strategy formulation, the formulation of some kinds of corporate strategies using narrow AI, conservative construal of today's technology? Because super AI, we may talk about it speculatively, but we're not in a position to know much about it because, sort of as you highlighted, we don't even have a coherent research program that gets us close to general AI yet. We have different notions of how we're going to go about doing it, but we have no convergence on the program itself. So as a result, to have this conversation, make it productive, this is where we have to focus. I've got 4 or 5 more slides. Thank you for your patience. So a common and quite reasonable argument why machines can't do strategy is that strategy and management are more than just number crunching. And here we would be in fantastic company because that is what Mixmaster P has been telling us for a long time. Right? Strategy is decidedly not operational effectiveness. Because if it were about optimization and crunching numbers, it would be dark days for the field because this stuff is in fact in the machine wheelhouse. Right? So thankfully, this is not what we're talking about here. What I think we might be talking about here, which is closer to my understanding of what strategy might be about, is a series of choices that Porter talks about, daring to be different, daring to be creative. These are essentially predictions about the world, untested hypotheses about the state of the world today, the resources we currently have, the bets about the future, and what we can do. And here, in our paper, we suggest that cast in machine learning terms, these are prediction and inference problems. These problems, as it turns out, we've been making, as you pointed out, thankfully, a fair amount of headway in. We'll talk about this in just a minute. But this is like the meat and potatoes. Again, absent implementation. And it's very important here, as like a little asterisk, that like what we've done here is we've basically gotten rid of implementation and just talked about the hypothesis testing. Because if you take that and turn it up to 11, you get our strategy as theorist stuff. This is my colleague Todd Zenger and also with Teppo Feline talking about what strategy really is these predictions as full-blown corporate theories. This is managers or CEOs as like Miles Davises or Picassos of corporate formulation, and that there's this creative stuff that human beings can do that unfortunately machines cannot do and never will be able to do. So I'm going to make 3 statements from our paper and then 3 provocations. Although there's debate about whether optimization problems are actually strategy problems, problems of this type are going to be yielding increasingly to machines. I think this is the interesting one for me. Insofar as one can convert or alchemize a traditional strategy problem into a problem of prediction and inference, those problems machines will increasingly handle. And finally, it's unclear to me, and it's unclear in this paper, that analogical reasoning, which is the third reason that we can't do this stuff, represent either the complete view or the correct view for conceptual foundations for how you develop breakthrough strategies. Maybe I can just leave these up and let it be, right? Does that work?
Yeah, why not?
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, guys.
don't know about you, but I feel a combination of being inspired, confused, and frightened at this stage. And I'm conscious this is probably more of a day squeezed into an hour, given the sectors, the different perspectives, and so on. I'm conscious we might have.
So let's take
10
minutes for questions.
Oh, wow.
We'll run 15 minutes behind, but I think that's fine.
Okay. The hard ones go to the right. Please.
So thanks for three excellent presentations. I think that they were really, really inspiring in many respects. I like in particular this idea of having thinking frameworks. I do agree completely. I mean, the more data you have, the more you have to think, because these two things are complementary. I actually have a question which resonated in my mind for a long time, and I have no answer, so I'd like to see whether you can help me with this. One preoccupation I have is basically the following. The way we think of machines and algorithms, and who is producing this machine and algorithms that in the end make choices for us. And if you look at where artificial intelligence has started, it's actually developed. It is largely developed by white males in California. So they embody in the machines certain ways of thinking that are very special of this part of the population. And to me, this is a problem. And I would like to see whether it's a problem for you as well. Let me give you an example. You have machines which will probably tell you, you have to make a choice ex ante on whether to kill a baby, a girl, a boy, or something like that. But maybe the right thing to put into the machine is, look, today the odds that you are running into something is higher than the average, you should not run. And you see, these are judgments that are actually made by the people who decide to decide the machines and the algorithms. And to me, the big problem is that these decisions today are made by a tiny fraction of the world population with a very special culture, which will produce machines with that very special culture. Do you think it's an issue or not?
Daniel, we haven't heard from you for a while. I know you're dying to come in there. I'm sure
My
you've all
question
did,
is
but
genuine. I really don't know the answer.
It's
There's no
a very good
rhetoric in my question. Maybe the answer is no.
So I think that, there are two types of building, well, there are multiple types of building AI systems. One is rule-based, like what you're describing, but the other is you build this black box of a model, you give it data and you train it, and actually I don't think that you're not building any rules into it. It's the biases that it's going to have are from the data that you show it. So I think that for the most part, these types of deep learning models and things like that, they're not programmed by these people. They're trained by the data, and if you want to train a model on recognizing different types of fruit, you show it some fruit, and where it gets it wrong, you say, naughty model, that's not a banana, that's an apple, and it changes some numbers inside this black box, and next time you show it an apple, it says apple. So I think the biases will come from the data, not from the rules that the people are programming. But maybe you want to elaborate on that one.
I don't, I think.
you want to come in? Sorry, you were leaning in at that stage. Clara, do you want to come in?
Well, I just wanted to, from the business perspective, the work we do with our clients is not just the strategy and the frameworks around thinking about adoption of AI and places or within the organization where AI is applicable, but we also work with our clients on AI ethics, and we try to educate them around interrogating the models they are about to buy or they think of buying, whether those models are responsibly designed or not. So we spend a lot of time in capturing the whole theory around ethical design. It sits at the core of some of the work we deliver. I'd like to echo the concept of systems actually being driven by the data rather than human biases in many ways. And that's why we do spend time with our clients to look and build solid data governance thinking frameworks. And what they need to, and we empower boards to ask the right questions, to validate whether systems have this kind of frameworks.
Right at the back.
Can I just expand just on one thing? Oh, no.
No. I said before in the briefing I might be cutting in just to be kind, and you'd be brilliant, but I want to make sure we hear from you. It's right at the back. That's you. Well, nearly at the back. Sorry, Dan.
That's all right.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the rival business when
when you start incorporating AI. And here I'm thinking particularly of deep learning, right? So there's been a lot of findings in deep learning across now many different fields that a lot of the things that we're learning are actually very fragile to the small things. And so if you make little perturbations, you can really fool it. You can make it think that a stop sign is just a speed, like a speed limit sign, or vice versa. So I'm wondering, I mean, that seems like as we start incorporating these into businesses, you can imagine a thing where you say, like, you know your competitor is doing this, you might try and tweak some of the market signals and see if you can get them to do something notably bad, right? And of course, probably the place where we see this first is in finance, right? Where people are using high-speed algorithms to try and do this. Can you talk a little bit about how you think this is going to play out in terms of, like, are people going to start incorporating these in a big way, or are they going to start putting in checks to make sure that they're not doing weird things? How do you see that rivalry playing out?
One of the critiques against thinking about where we've progressed is what is in the public domain and why. And so for strategy scholars who are interested in these sorts of things, I found long-form site visits, semi-structured interviews, and spending time with people to find out what's going on is really useful.
Maybe how it will play out is that you will have AIs trying to exploit those vulnerabilities, and it will become an AI arms race. And the people that build the AIs first will probably win. Does that make sense?
Let's just chat about that, like on offline.
Yeah. So I mean, my sense is, because people are already building those kind of models, right? Where you have, and even there, you still can see interesting sort of weak points that you can push on and exploit the original algorithms and its assumptions it's making out of data, which turn out to be not necessarily the assumptions we make when we look at that same data.
I mean, although I'm facilitating today, I have a lot I could add, but the one comment I'd make is there is a gaping hole between, if you like, the potential you just talked about, and then the typical strategy MD board role, their ability to use that information and work with it. Gaping hole. Whatever the BS you hear about, whatever you see in the media, there's an absolutely gaping hole, right, which is quite scary. Because actually there's a lot of AI experiments going on in companies that the senior people don't even know about. Any other?
Maybe
Last one.
question, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Rob, thanks for bringing up this question as to whether machines can strategize. I think that the answer to that, if there was any doubt, the answer to that was given on February 10th, 1996, when Deep Blue beat Garrett Kasparov, right? Now, depending on how you define strategy, you might say this is not approved, but I would say chess is inherently a strategic game. Later, of course, machines beat people in poker, and more recently in Go, so machines can strategize. The question is what kind of strategy they can come up with.
That's right.
And this is the Achilles heel of AI. AI essentially does what we as good scientists are not supposed to do. It is theory-free. It is looking for associations in the data. So once you feed it a large set of data, it will discover associations. Could this lead to strategy that is based on small data sets or no data sets, right? Martin Tammuz has this wonderfully titled paper called Learning from Samples of One or Less. Would AI ever be able to learn from small samples?
So the question is great, and it highlights the challenge that, this is part of what I wanted to provoke in thinking about these sorts of problems, is we know machines can engage in strategies. Right? So the question is not, can machines think? That's not the question I'm interested in. And the question I'm actually find irrelevant is, can machines generate strategies? Because they do. The question is, can machines do the specific kinds of strategy formulation that you're describing? And to do that requires a fairly careful decomposition of this stuff. But thinking about what it would mean to generate a breakthrough strategy, whether or not extrapolating from a sample of one is enough, whether firms can stumble into overperformance, all these things become, are things that we're carefully considering. Now, the end of one question, I think the answer is still no. And I'm open to you to tell me otherwise.
I don't think so, yeah.
So there we have no clear path forward for even figuring out how to do that. So if it were the case that we found out that it was impossible to do this, we would therefore be able to declare victory and say that human strategist is safe. And what we're trying to do in this paper is sort of play with the boundary conditions and say what can we how can we fruitfully have this conversation in our field in a way that's not
Want me to wrap up? Okay, boss. I'm sorry, don't blame me. It's always good to leave a session with ambiguity. I guess that gives an opportunity to delve deeper, right?
And we have a coffee break.
Yeah. I mean, what we intended to do, and we obviously will spend quite a lot of time, what we wanted to do is look under the lid of machines with people who are right at the cutting edge of actually doing it, thinking about it, applying it, as opposed to what you might read in the media or what you might hear and see on exec education programs. Can we say thank you to our panel of Clara, Daniel,